So, good morning, everybody. I'm really pleased to be with you today to show you a repository I've started to build approximately 6 months ago from my own experience working as a lead data scientist in a consultancy firm in Paris. So, basically, we are building algorithms for clients, and most of the times the clients do not come with a lot of data. So, we have started focusing on few-shot learning, which is exactly the area of deep learning where people try to build classifiers with deep neural networks, but with as few data as was just one sample per class. This is somehow the techniques used for face recognition, for instance. So from my own experience, I've started to try to build a repository to be able to be fast in implementing some of the state-of-the-art algorithm in your own data set so that you can ship that to production and build a working product. So to get started, what exactly few-shot learning in production? So you might notice on the right and on the right-hand side of this slide some picture of a model. So yeah, it's me because I was working as a model before. And then so say you have references, images of a catalog. Say the client is a company like a menswear company, for instance, and I want to build a classifier to be able to look for images, like similar images, onto the internet. So on the right-hand side should be images from a basic Google search images, and then you want to be able to classify these kind of images against a very small database that you have from a specific kind of images. So this is few-shot learning. So I'm going to introduce some concept about what people do usually in this kind of situation, and then we are going to focus on Siamese nets and some code, and then question in the end maybe, and hopefully. So the framework of meta-learning, I mean, in usual learning, so you have a data set and you train epoch after epoch, so that in the end you end up with a classifier, so that from an image you can output a label. In meta-learning, what you do is that you train your network to be able to update it with few images that you want to classify in the end. So the training step is much more like using a training data to output a potential classifier that you will have to update in the end with the data that you are interested in. So you can see on the right-hand side that it outputs a function from image to label. So this is called meta-learning in literature. There are two main approaches in meta-learning. So the first one is without retraining, so that you will hopefully you will use your deep neural network and try to sort of compare the images that you want to classify, but without retraining, so without updating the weight. There is another option with retraining. So here it's a picture of Daniel Tammet. I don't know if you know this guy, but he's the one, I guess, with the biggest, or I mean, the fastest memory capacity of the world. He has learned all the p decimals and so on and so forth. You can look for him and Wikipedia. So with retraining, it's just learning fast. So you have to be able to train your network so that when you do just few epochs with few data, it's okay, but you still update the weight. And without retraining, you just use the network in a sense that may be possible for you with, say, comparison. So I'm going to focus on the first option now, because in production setting, you don't really want to retrain your network because there are lots of uncertainty and maybe you don't have time and so on and so forth. So I'm going to focus on that first option. So we call that metric learning, because in the end, all you want to do is to be able to learn sort of a similarity between images, so that when you want to predict an image that you have never seen, you just have to compare these new images with a small databases with as few as one sample per class, and in the end use the closest samples, for instance, or you can do nearest neighbor, you can do whatever you want. So when you learn that, you basically use the encoder, so deep CNN backbone. I mean, it could be few layers or usual architectures like GreenNet 50 or anything you want if you do transfer learning. And then you embed all these images and you compare the features with a head model, a similarity, a distance. I mean, there's a lot of vocabulary here. So the main idea is just to understand that you compare the images, and this metric can be the usual L1, L2, anything you want metric. You can also learn a small model to learn a similarity. So it was done in the previous years with the the first IAM business model in 2015, working on Alphabet. They did that. I've said that it's used a lot in face recognition algorithm. As you may all know, when you buy a new iPhone, you just try to scan your face for the Face ID. You do that a couple of times, like 1, 2, 3, 4 shots, and then it's okay, and the iPhone can recognize you. So this is the kind of technology they use, and they focus a lot in face recognition onto this similarity that they want to learn, because basically they have a lot of data, so they want to be the more precise in these final steps. So as you can see, depending on how depending on the similarity you choose, you can end up, this is an illustration of that paper, you can end up with classes well separated or classes not that much well separated. So of course you would like to be on the right hand side with the arc face. This was a recent paper from 2019. But still, in the context of face recognition, that they have a lot of data of faces. Maybe not just a lot of your faces, but a lot of data of faces. So they can build a classifier which knows the good features for that kind of images. As the guy before me told me, that you have to know the good features for your problem. So in future learning in production, you may start with just few images of what you are interested in, and then as soon as the production flow goes, you have a lot of data, and you can maybe adapt your strategy. But in the beginning, it's not as easy as that. If you go for future learning in the academic paper, you will see that most of the time the dataset that they use is a balance. So they have like OmniGlow dataset, mini ImageNet dataset. Maybe they work also with the were new dataset because people were saying it's not exactly the reality anyway. So the classes are balanced, while when you work in a production environment, you don't really know what's going to do. I mean, when it's going through your network. So usually they start with random initial weights because they want to see that their algorithm is able to learn fast. So they use shallow architectures, and they start with random weights. While when you are in production, you obviously want to start with pre-trained weights. ImageNet, for instance, because it's the default option, and it's good like that. So the dataset size is also constant in academic paper, while in production you will have new data every day normally, if it works well for you. So the support set, namely the size of the dataset for the classification, so the label data that you have for the label that you want to classify is constant. So in a research paper, you say, for instance, I'm going to take that 5 classes out and try to classify them with just 1 or 2 samples for each of this class. While in a production environment, you may have just 1 in the beginning, but then someone use your code, and then you have a second one and a third one, and so on and so forth. So it keeps increasing normally. So you want to use that information as well. It's not exactly the same. And so in academic paper, they say that, so we have, for instance, 5 classes, and we classify them. So if you want to add a new classes, you maybe have to retrain your network, especially if you are doing meta-learning with retraining. While in production, maybe you have a user, so he's just doing the inventory in the shop, and then you see there is a new item. You want to be able to classify this item straight away. There is no delay normally. So there is an instantaneous need for a new class. All these considerations leads me to the SIAM-ISNet framework for meta-learning. So as I've said, you have one single encoders, but you pass pairs of data so that the pair of data are you have them fit their features, and you can compute the similarity. So if it's just normalized, you can do 0 if it's different, and try to learn 1 if it's the same, so that in the end you have a pairwise similarity, and you are able to compare 2 images. So when you have this similarity, you can just do basic things like nearest neighbors, but you can also consider that you have so-called kernel in the machine learning field, so a function to compare to input. And so in that feature space, you could also try to use more complex things like SVM if you want, maybe more complex nearest neighbors, and so on and so forth. So you can add complexity in this feature space or not, and depending on your context in production, you may want to do so, or you may want to stick with the simple things, because the most simple it is, the most robust it is to different situations. I mean, if you want to use, let's say, an SVM, but your classes are very imbalanced, you will not be able to learn a good SVM or a good Gaussian process classifier. So you may want to stick with one single nearest neighbor. This depends on the situation, so you want to be able to try that on your data as fast as possible. This is an illustration of the training of usual SAMISNet. So this is the pairwise similarity of the train set. It's sorted by label. So as you can see, iteration after iteration, so epochs after epochs. Normally, you should end up with a huge diagonal with white value meaning 1 and black values meaning 0. So the classifier is able, at least on the train set, to distinguish between the classes and to make huge white squares because all the elements from the same classes returns the same 1 value. As you can see here, there are also misclassified classes, so you may know already that your classifier is not perfect because maybe there are some classes that are too similar from its point of view, so it's not possible to classify them anymore. So anyway, this is an illustration. And when you go from train to test, so this is an illustration of a test set. So the support set is, if it's not clear, so there is one single column per image in the support set, and one row represents one query image, so one image that you want to classify, and you compute the similarity between that single image and the support set. So you end up with a row with either zero of a value between 0 and 1, and then this is just a heat map to illustrate that with a lot of query images onto that support set. And so you see, you can see some patterns and some similarity that the network knows. So this kind of things is somehow the kernel matrix that you could have on your train set. And if you are doing more complex things like SVM, you would typically use this kernel matrix to optimize then the support vector, if you are familiar with SVM. And so this is just of the support set. So as I have said, there are a lot of possibilities in that kind of framework, and I have found myself sometimes a bit lost because when you read the papers, you never really know if they want to say improve the metric, if it works for them because they have improved the learning strategy, namely the pairs, the sequence of pairs that they ship to the network, the learning rate, the backbones, and there are a lot of things. So when you want to use your data, it's not always easy. So that's why I have started this repository that we are using now in my company to build our models. So the first things comes with the SAMISNet model builder. It's nothing complicated. There is the first part here, which is the encoder, so the deep backbone, just wrapped a bit so that you can use your own or you can use the one from Keras. And there is then the pairwise metric similarity, the head model, depending on how you want to call it, just to make sure here that the input shape are compatible, and then so build a full model then with as many inputs. Because there are also some possibilities to have not only 2 inputs here, but maybe 3 inputs. If you know, for instance, the triplet loss, normally you don't ship just 2 images, you ship 3 images to the network so that you have a pairwise comparison, and so on and so forth. These are all the possibilities that exist in literature so that you want to try maybe with your data. So this is the full model and return. And when you want to train that model, so you have there is a bit of pre-processing and data augmentation usually with the future, usually, and then especially with future learning. So I don't know if you're familiar with this library, but I think that EMG-aug is quite useful in that context because there are a lot of ready-built augmenters that you can use in a sequential way. So for instance here, when I use it will open the image and flip it with a probability 0.5 left and right, flip it, probability 0.5 up and down. It will rotate it with a uniform distribution between -180 and 80, crop to the target size of the network, and then just assert shapes to make sure that you ship the correct shape to the network. And then you have to apply the pre-processing specific to the model that you are using. As it has been said before, when you use pre-trained network on ImageNet, depending if it's MobileNet, if it's ResNet, if it's Inception, they may not have all used the same pre-processing. So be sure to use the right pre-processing that they have used when I've tried the network. So especially here in Keras, you can find all these functions already available. So I've just dropped that here. So this is typically a notebook that you can find in the repository. So you can be very attentive now, and then you can go back home and just click run and run and run, and it will work with your data. And then so I build the model with the builder I've shown you just before. So I'm specifying which encoder I want to use, so which branch model. So here I've used the ResNet 50. Could have used something else. And then so this is a custom head layer that I've written myself. Because most of the time there are people using say the absolute difference in the feature space. There are people using the cosine similarity. There are people using L2 norms. So I've just wrapped all that things in a so-called mixed norm layer so that you can use whatever you want, maybe one, maybe two. There are some other norms in the repository as well, or you could just add your similarity that you want to try. And then so it's done like that. Then you can, And then you can train the network. So to train the network, you have usually in Keras or in TensorFlow 2 the need for a data loader at some point. So a generator of data, a generator of pairs here. So I have coded as well some pairs sequences. So before in TensorFlow 1 point something and Keras, there were a so-called sequence class which were done on that purpose to generate batches for parallel processing of the batches and then ship that to the feed generator function of the model. Now in TensorFlow 2, they recommend to use the df.data API. So I'm about to merge that code, but still now it uses this already available but maybe soon deprecated Keras sequence API. So anyway, you can ship random pairs, but here there is a point which is quite difficult when you want to train a Siamese net, because if you just ship random pairs, obviously you will just find pairs which do not match. So you end up learning to a network that you just have zero similarity. So there is a real work in this training to know whether you have to ship similar pairs or not, in which proportion. Do you want half of the pairs to be similar, half of the pairs to be different? How many classes do you want in each batch? So there is a real need of a good engineering in that part, because it can dramatically change the result of your training. So these sequences here are really important. I have just 2 sequences now in that repositories. So now you can also do hard mining, meaning that batch after batches, you just select the pair with the highest loss so that the networks can improve on the difficult cases. If you do hard mining, you have to be aware that you may destroy your network on the usual cases. So, I mean, it's not easy to train a Siamese net, and you have to try and you have to pay attention to all the metrics that you want to do, that you want to look at when you train the network. And as my colleague said before, there is also obviously a transfer learning part. So first, I usually freeze the embedding first, so that I use the pre-trained weight, and then with the smallest learning rate, I can adapt all the backbone or just a part of the backbone. So for instance, here, I've just unfreeze 20% of the backbone, but you can do differently. That you have to try as well. You have to run first and then see how it's going, and then maybe do it differently. This was for ResNet 50, sorry. This just because in French we always say like that. For MobileNet, for instance, as I usually unfreeze all the network. So depending on the depth of the network that you're using as a backbone, it may change. And so it is. So when you do few shot learning, think about how you will use the model, because the best scorer in the literature are most about meta-learning, but my guess is that in production it's really difficult to use. So maybe spend a bit more time fine-tuning your metric learning approach than trying to use meta-learning. As far as I know, it works quite well for us. So for metric learning, if you use a more complex classifier, be aware that you might have to retrain that as well, even if it's just an SVM or a Gaussian process classifier, which adds a bit of complexity. So depending on the situation, depending on what you want, if it has to be immediate or not, you may stick with a single nearest neighbor classifier. Still, you can learn that similarity, so you can have a bit of complexity. So when you train the network, you have to ship pairs. Pairs are not obvious. The choice of the pairs that you send to the network during training have a huge impact on the quality of your network in the end. I mean, it's not a huge impact; it's a real huge impact. If you mess with your batches, if the batches are too small, if there are not enough classes in it, if there are too many classes, if it's not balanced, then seriously, you may not converge at all. So you have to try that. You have to be aware of the importance of that step. There is something new now I have done in the repository, but not shown here because we don't have that much time. And anyway, so it's because the naive approach is here to ship some pairs to the networks because networks is built using pairs. But finally, and it's done like that as well in TensorFlow add-ons. If you look at the triplet loss, you can consider that you ship a batch of data, let's say a batch size of 64. Then with that batches, you can compute 64 power 2 pairs. And into that 64 power 2 pairs, then you pick the one that you want if you do hard mining, or you take them all if you just want to take them all. But then you have to be aware that depending on how many classes you ship in that batches, it may be more difficult to for the network to learn what you want. So this produces much better results, but once again, you have to be aware of the batches, so of the sequence that you will use. And last thing, if you have seen that 6 months ago, TensorFlow released also the TensorFlow extended framework for pushing TensorFlow model to production. So it's all pipeline. So now I am adding a support for I'm migrating this to this framework. So especially the advice to use the saved model option in TensorFlow so that you can use the model directly in production. And what does that mean for the SiamesNet model is that normally, if you do just like that, you have some tensor for the support set, and then you do the comparison and you output the result. But if you want to have that all in the saved model that can be used in a production environment, then you want maybe that model to behave as it was a usual classifier. I mean, in production, you don't really want to know if it's a usual classifier or if it's a SiamesNet or if it's anything else that you want. You want to give an image and then you want to have back the labels. So this is done as well with some different layers. I'm not showing here, but you can find them to the repositories. So finally, some resources. I have been started with Fuchsia Learning thanks to Kaggle 1.5 years ago because we were a bit lost. There are a lot of. There is one competition called the whale identification where people have done a lot of great jobs. So you can find some inspiration there. There is also a company called NanoNet that specializes in Fuchsia Learning, and they can give you APIs of Fuchsia Learning. So you just go to their website, you upload 20 images of each classes, and then they open for you an API route that you can call to have the classifier. So it's interesting to see how it works. And then so finally, this is the URL of the repositories. So obviously one day I'll be published it as a package, but I'm still actively working on it, so there is nothing very stable. I mean, you can use it, but maybe not as stable as a package. And it's the same here, so it's over. Thanks.